Newsom's plan, California's middle-class tax pay, could get a rebate under proposal. Sacramento, writing a breathtaking and exquisitely timed $75.7 billion surplus. Governor Gavin Newsom on Monday proposed putting $600 in the pockets of two-thirds of California taxpayers in a state rebate that, if approved, would be the largest in U.S. history. MSN.com. The proposal, one in a series of governor's plans to make this week, this was a couple weeks ago actually, in his annual budget revision, takes advantage of a remarkable turnaround in the state's financial picture that comes not only in California, as California emerges from the coronavirus pandemic, but also as Mr. Newsom works to diffuse an expected recall election. Other plans for the windfall are requiring legislative approval, includes aid in low-income Californians who are behind in their utility bills and rental payments, expanded child care subsidies, drought and wildlife mitigation, and more. In less than a year, the state's financial picture has swung from bust to boom, thanks largely to California's tax system, which relies heavily on the kind of higher income workers who were able to work from home and thus keep their jobs during the pandemic. The state cashed in not only on income tax, but taxes on capital gains from booming stock market as investments made affluent Californians wealthier and as a number of California's startups went public. Rebound along with a $26 billion infusion of federal stimulus money sent to the state budget, soaring even through a year ago at this time. California was early May, a $54 billion shortfall. Even after fulfilling legal obligations to fund public schools, pay debt, and put money into the state rainy day fund, the leftover discretionary supply is still more than twice as large as early estimated. California is not just back, California is roaring back, Mr. Newsom, a Democrat, said on Monday in a news conference in Oakland, where he appeared with the chairs of the state budget committees and ignored questions about the recall. His rebate plan would send state stimulus checks of at least $600 to about 11 million middle-class taxpayers with adjusted gross income of less than $75,000, with an extra $500 to those with dependent children. The income threshold and benefit would be halved for married couples. Okay, so you don't get the whole 600, you get only half of it. The proposal would cover eligible taxpayers regardless of immigration status who did not get a $600 state stimulus check under an earlier program that targeted more than 4 million low-income Californians. The rebate checks, totaling nearly $11 billion, would return money to 2 in 3 of the state's tax filers, according to Mr. Newsom, and they are sure to please voters as challengers gear up campaign to replace Mr. Newsom in unlikely event that the state heavily Democratic decides to recall him. But Mr. Newsom's motivation is not entirely political. The rebate payment are required by May 2023 under the provision of a 1979 state spending limit. The law passed by voters as part of a tax revolt that swept the state calls for a taxpayer rebate in per capita spending, adjusting to account for growth exceeds a certain level for 2 consecutive years. Raphael Son of a Gun, the executive director of the Pat Brown Institute of Public Affairs of California State University, Los Angeles, said it was unlikely that an extra $600 would soften hardline opposition to Mr. Newsom among the state's minority of Republican voters. I think it's awful. Hard to conceive people of anything these days, Mr. Son of a Gun said. The real audience is more likely to be Democrats and independents who now have a stronger reason to stay with the governor and the governor's party. Mr. Newsom's proposal was immediate just for conservative recall candidates. Californians need permanent, real tax relief, not just one-time stimulus checks, Kevin Faulkner said on May 11th. Faulkner, the Republican former mayor of San Diego, wrote on Twitter, While many states, including California, initially were predicted that the pandemic would be a catastrophic for the budget, many of those projections have become less dire in recent months. A report of the National Conference of State Legislatures found that more than 30 states have revised their revenue forecast upward from the start of pandemic, allowing some to revisit cuts they previously made. A handful, including Idaho, had proposed their own form of stimulus or tax relief, but none approximating the scope and scale of Newsom's plan. Still, experts emphasize that many states, particularly those that rely heavily on tourism and sales tax revenue, like Hawaii and Nevada, have struggled financially. The inequality of the pain in the current downturn is striking, said Richard Oxier, a researcher with the Tax Policy Center. That's me reporting on good old California. Yes, the Golden State.